Good morning, afternoon, night. Welcome to the Chicken Box. It is another wonderful episode as we are all basking in the sun or in wherever we are in the glow of the new inauguration yesterday. Well, at least we are here at the Afro American. Give it up for the history that was made yesterday. It was an amazing day. That's not our topic today. Our topic actually is Black people versus intellectual property. That's right. Some people may not even have ever heard the name. We're going to find out what intellectual property is, but we have seen over the years very successful artists, writers, and creators have things that they thought they created just taken from them and used by somebody else. I think you got that again. Used by somebody else. If this is your first time on the Chicken Box, welcome. As I said, grab your lunch, grab your breakfast, grab your dinner. We debunk stereotypes. We get down to the nitty gritty, and we have our moment that we get to get on the box. If you're from Baltimore, a chicken box is 4 wings and fries. But if you're just from the world, the chicken box is a place you can speak your truth. Even if the truth doesn't resonate with somebody else. I said, stop getting upset, everybody, because somebody doesn't agree with you. You're a Republican, I'm a Democrat. I don't like you anymore. You went to this school, I went to that school. I don't like you anymore. Is that really the way to be? I hope not. As we try to unite these states, we're going to have fun. Again, I'm going to introduce my co-host. I'm Kevin Impeccable Peck, representing the Gen X's. Dr. Draper, good morning. Afternoon.
Good morning, afternoon, evening. I'm Francis Tony Draper. Excuse me, a little frog in my throat, and I am representing the boomers. I think I'm a boomer millennial at times. Sometimes I'm a boomer Gen Xer, but mostly a boomer millennial. So hello to everybody. Welcome again to the Chicken Box. Like us and share with your friends. We're going to have a wonderful time talking about intellectual property today.
Absolutely. Misha Green, how are you this morning?
I am doing well today. I am, again, Misha. I am representing for the millennials, or as we say, the millennial boomers. Kevin says, Impeccable says that y'all never hear or see my dogs, but I feel like my dog is going crazy in the background, and you guys can hear and see it. So if so, just know that there's a fifth guest on the Chicken Box today.
Absolutely. Well, what is your dog's name again? We're going to say hello to your invisible dog that we can't see really quick.
Onyx is in here today.
Okay, what's up, Onyx? You hanging out? He probably wants a chicken bone. Anyway, if you just tuned in, this is the Chicken Box. We're talking about Black people versus intellectual property, broadcasting live from the Afro American Newspapers Facebook page. Let's do ourselves a service today, because when we connect, we get stronger. Let's share. It's a little share button. Looks like an arrow. Oh, you're already ahead of the game. Just hit share. Somebody out there is a creator. Somebody out there wants to know about the intellectual property, and somebody is really looking to find out really what's going to happen after yesterday. So we got a lot in store for you. Like when we talk about intellectual property, we're talking about ownership and rights. Now, we know Black people are innovators when it comes to the culture, and we always have been. We create a lot of things that have, that's right, we think our name on it, our brand, our likeness on it, but do we own it? That is the question. We have a special guest, friend of mine. I think I've known this young lady for over 30 years. She's one of the the best entertainment attorney in the world as far as and she just happens to be African American and happens to train from Howard University and happens to be the one who recruited Kamala Harris to the debate team. Everybody welcome Lita Rosario to the Chicken Box.
Hi, everyone. Lita Rosario Richardson here.
Oh, I'm sorry. You did get married in the pandemic. It's Lita Rosario Richardson, everybody. For all you men out there was wondering was she still single. She is not single anymore. She is married. So welcome, Lita.
Thank you.
Before we get started, hi, Rochelle, DJ, Mr. Lee is in the house. Brian Thomas, Kevin Antonio Small, Byron, Diana hanging out with us. Everybody wants to know about the Chicken Box. Okay, Lita, before we get started.
Sure.
Can you tell us just the ins and outs of intellectual property? What does it really break
Sure.
down in layman's terms?
Right. So intellectual property means basically intangible property. And it basically breaks down to four different things: copyrights, trademarks, patents, and trade secrets. Some people also consider publicity rights in the context of intellectual property. So we'll talk about that a little too. But I think a lot of people are concerned, and they'll talk about getting a patent for something that's supposed to be trademarked, or they'll talk about trying to get a trademark for something that's supposed to be copywritten. So to break it down real easily for you, copyright relates to creative works of authorship that have been put down or fixed in some type of a tangible medium. So, i.e., a song that's been either the lyrics or the music written down on a piece of paper, or recorded on a CD, or recorded even up on the cloud now. So that's a copyright. Other examples of copyright are artwork, an artist that draws, whether that's graphic arts or fine art, although they're typically treated differently. Another type of copyrightable work would be a movie or a video. All those things would be copyrightable. So now let's talk about trademarks. So, and the interesting thing about copyrights, is that copyrights last for the life of the author plus 70 more years. So that's a long time to collect royalties for works of authorship. And that's, I think, what a lot of people don't understand and miss out on when they sell their rights too quickly. Next, we could talk about trademarks. So trademarks typically go to identify a brand. They are there to identify products or services, called a service mark, but the same thing. So let's say Chick-fil-A, or Friday's restaurants, or Adidas athletic wear, Nike athletic wear. Those names are trademarks. Now, in general, a title does not get a trademark if all it is a title. So if you have a name of a song, or a name of a movie, a name of a TV show, you don't automatically get a trademark for that. What you would have to do is actually create some type of a product or service that's not the underlying work. So a lot of times in those cases, the underlying work is copyrightable. So let's say you write a movie, your actual script is copyrightable. The name of the movie can only get a trademark if you do something with it, like put it on merchandise, or decide that you're going to create some product that relates to the movie. But just having the name of a book or a movie or a TV show doesn't entitle you to a trademark. Also, a lot of people think, and I see this a lot, that they can get a t-shirt and put some type of artistic design on the front of the t-shirt, and they think they're creating a label, and that they can go get a trademark for whatever that is. So let's say it says top of the show on your t-shirt. Well, just putting it on a t-shirt does not entitle you to have a trademark. It has to actually be a tag, a hang tag that says this is top of the show line of t-shirts, right? Or the label inside of the shirt has to say top of the line. That will get you a trademark, not just getting a bunch of t-shirts or hoodies and printing something on the front of it. Next, patents. Patents are interesting. Now, let me say this. Trademarks can last for as long as you use them. So the thing that will end a trademark, so they can last in perpetuity if they're continued to be used. If they're not used, then you lose out. Next, we have patents. And patents are for inventions, is the best way to think of it, or unique designs. You can get something called a design patent. So patents protect a process or a procedure or a design or an engineering activity that is protectable, meaning that you get the right to have some exclusive rights to it. If you are the inventor, you're the person who files for the patent at the patent office. Most patents only last 20 years. So the best example I can give you of patents is pharmaceutical drugs. So for instance, let's take Viagra. Once Viagra's 20 years runs out, anybody else can make Viagra and sell it, any other pharmaceutical company. But guess what? They can't call it Viagra. That's why there are different names for generic drugs, because they can't use the trademarked name that the pharmaceutical company has. They protect their rights in their brand, their specific version of Viagra, by calling it Viagra and not something else. Okay. Next, we have trade secrets. So trade secrets are not the product of federal law. So copyrights, patents, and trademarks all are federal law protected. Basically, they're federal rights that you or your company can have to protect your intellectual property. Trade secrets, on the other hand, are not protected by federal law. And the most important thing about trade secrets is that you have to keep it a secret. If you put it out to the general public, it's not a secret anymore. So, right, types of trade secrets are recipes. So Kentucky Fried Chicken, the recipe for Kentucky Fried Chicken is a trade secret, or Popeye's chicken. So while the government, the FDA, might require them to list the main ingredients of what's in it, how they do it in the percentages of the different ingredients is what they can keep secret. And they have to keep it literally under lock and key. You have to restrict the employees who have access to it. You have to actively seek to secret it. The other big thing that is a trade secret are customer lists, right? So email lists of customers. That's another classic example. A lot of employees sign non-compete or non-disclosure agreements when they get a new job. And typically what they're being asked to keep secret or not compete with is things that you find on in the context of trade secrets. And lastly, we can talk about publicity rights. So publicity rights are the rights for an individual to have some right, and it's kind of the opposite of a privacy right. So a publicity right is your right to promote yourself or to promote products that have your name on it, or any type of service that has your name on it. So for celebrities, let's say for a particular celebrity, they might want to get an endorsement deal. And so Nike's going to pay them to be in commercial, or hotels.com is going to pay them to be in a commercial. Those are their publicity rights. Now, important thing to know about publicity rights. Other than the state of California or the state of Tennessee, once you die, your publicity rights evaporate. And that means that anybody can use your name and likeness if they want to, other than California and Tennessee. In those two states, Tennessee, why? Because of the great Elvis. The state of Tennessee wanted to protect Elvis's legacy, so they passed a law. Now, in California and Tennessee, the rights after you pass away for your estate or your heirs to own your publicity rights are not automatic. You have to make registrations with the state and make a claim or an assertion of those rights before it actually vests in your estate or in your heirs. It doesn't happen automatically, so you certainly need a lawyer. And that's my brief description of intellectual property.
Oh my goodness, y'all. If you just tuned in, this is the Chicken Box. This is Black people versus the intellectual property. And I don't know if you didn't know what it was before, you're going to have to go back and rewind afterwards the recording and share. For 129 years, the Afro-American newspaper has been sharing, informing, educating, and inspiring African Americans, not only around the Baltimore and Washington area, but around the world. And now really around the world, if you're able to watch us on the internet. Whew, this is this Chicken Box where we speak our truth. That was an iconic description. Rochelle said you got some of your students. Actually, I'm going to give a quick shout out to Rochelle. As you may know and you may not know, I've managed Drew Hill since they were 14 years old. Rochelle was the director of the fan club. She just worked her way in. She was a big fan, and she grew up, and she interned for Lita, and then she said, I'm going to be an attorney, and then she went to school. Then she stopped going to school. Then she got it together and said, boom, and last year, I think she finally passed the bar. So, Rochelle, I see you tuning in, and she actually helped Drew Hill and Cisco out with renewing their trademarks after 20 years. That's right, y'all. Drew Hill has been around for 20 years. But anyway, we're just shouting you out, Rochelle, because you're a boss. You're a boss attorney now. So we're gonna get on the box. Dr. Draper, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word intellectual property?
The first thing that comes to my mind, and after hearing Lita Rosario Richardson, is that you need an attorney.
That's right.
The first thing that comes to my mind is that there's so many nuances to intellectual property, and I think what's gotten a lot of us a lot of disappointment is that we we've tried to do so many things on our own. Laws have changed. Now, back in the day, we're going to talk about that a little bit. Artists and others didn't have that kind of advice. Not that it might not have been there, but there weren't people that looked like Lita that really cared about what
That's right.
happened to their property. And African Americans, not just us exclusively, but we are creative people and we are creating things all of the time. And you think you own it, but you don't. So,
Mhm.
so my takeaway from this is that Lita, we need you and many more like you to do what you do.
That's right. That's right. You do really need an attorney if you're, because oftentimes you're investing money. Typically, people who are creating intellectual property are either intending to make money for it and or they're investing a lot of money. And to make sure you're protected, you really do need a lawyer. You need to put that in your little budget for whatever you're doing. I have people come to me and say, oh, I'm starting a record company. I got 5 artists. I built a studio. I did this. I did marketing. But you don't even have a line item for legal in your budget. And the sad news for label owners, record label owners, that they really need to understand is that without a written agreement, they don't own those recordings that those artists are creating. The artists own them. It doesn't matter who paid for it. That's irrelevant. In order for intellectual property rights to be transferred, there has to be a signed writing, a written agreement. So if the artists haven't signed an agreement, or the producers, and this whole business of leasing tracks on the internet is just drives me crazy. It's the worst thing for the artist and the producer, and the proliferation of it is just, crazy. But in order to be in a position to really maximize your investment, you really need a lawyer to do the right things for you so you can get things in order properly.
Get a lawyer early. You pay now so you don't have to pay as much later. And that I think that's the moral of the story. Misha Green, our millennial superstar.
Well, first of all, thank you for that introduction. Yeah, I have to agree with Dr. Draper completely. After hearing Lita Rosario Richardson's excellent description, I guess I only can say what comes to mind is you need a lawyer, someone who is able to walk you through all of the ins and outs that she so eloquently described. I tried to take really rough notes. If y'all were trying, if some of the viewers, what I was doing, I was trying to take some really rough notes, but I'll even have to go back. Before you explained it in such detail, what came to mind was the history for people of color in relation to intellectual property. And, obviously we're seeing in very recent narratives, such as Maureen's Black Bottom and that, where you get little tastes and snippets of the issues that Black artists have dealt with in the past with their likeness. One of my favorite documentaries is 20 Feet from Stardom, which really kind of talks about that as well. But I feel like I was just sort of in this place and understanding of intellectual property in the sense of, if you don't know, then people can steal from you and people can take.
That's right. If you don't know, and if you can't count your own money. So I love to make the reference to the movie, the Ray Charles movie, where in the scene where he's going out to perform live and he tells them he wants all his money in $1 bills. And he does that because he knows that's the only way he can count his money to make sure his money is correct. And that's like an analogy to, whenever you have intellectual property rights, you have to know how to count your money. If you owned a corner store, you would understand how you make profits. If you're in a business that involves intellectual property, you have to know where your money is made. And if you don't know, I guarantee you somebody else that does will take your money.
Absolutely. Welcome to the Chicken Box, y'all. If you're just tuning in, Rachel, Rochelle, Pam, hello, everybody. I don't know what you guys thought about intellectual property, but it's a lot of stereotypes. This is Black people versus intellectual property. and we've heard all of the horror stories. Misha, can you run down some of these stereotypes? Guys, put in the chat if you have some stereotypes that you've heard or considered over the years. But Misha, what have you heard on the street, on those streets, those digital streets?
Yeah, these digital streets. I'm hearing a lot, and I want to say, and we'll probably get into this later in the discussion, but this has been major on the digital streets, if you will. Earlier in the pandemic, when Kanye West sort of was having his third or fourth iteration of his mental breakdown. But he really talked a lot about intellectual property and ownership of his music. And while we were aware that some of his transparency was related to mental health, it was a major wake-up call for people who are still not understanding that this is a conversation that we need to keep having, that we have to have more lawyers like Lita who advocate for us and help us understand how we have rights to our property and our ingenuity. So that said, these are all stereotypes, not necessarily views of Afro. Black people can create a lot of things, but they can't own things. I've seen a stereotype and people commenting on that. White people run the businesses and take Black people's money. Black artists are taken advantage of because of lack of legal knowledge and surrounding ownership. Black artists don't care about ownership on the front end if they're making money. There's no way to fully own your likeness, brand, and unique works, which of course Lisa just debunked for us. It's Black artists' fault for getting taken advantage of. I've heard. Artists of color are normally taken advantage of. Ownership is difficult. And then those artists who have made a fuss about their intellectual properties have been killed. And, a lot of people talk about Sam Cooke. These are all stereotypes. And then that Black people can be taken advantage of because there aren't enough people of color making the decisions. All stereotypes. Right. Thank goodness we have Lita today.
Yeah.
All right. Well, those are great. Let me jump in on one, and maybe Lita, we can go at this together. But before that, DJ Mr. Lee says, does the digital timestamp on a file in your computer hold up in court? I guess like if you.
So that is evidence of a date and time when a work may have existed, but it certainly doesn't suffice for copyright. You still have to file a copyright registration. And so that's important. That's kind of like the whole question of what people call the poor man's copyright, where someone would say you put it in an envelope and mail it to yourself. Well, the purpose of that was to establish a date and time when the work existed. And obviously, if you did that and opened the envelope, you destroyed the evidence. So if anyone does do that, don't open the envelope. That's the whole point. But that only establishes a date and time when the work existed. That doesn't mean that you didn't collaborate with someone before that time in the creation of it. It doesn't solve all of the legal issues that can come up around ownership of copyrights in particular. And just as a little side note, you're making me think about computer software. And computer software actually is entitled to a copyright for the coding itself, and then oftentimes a patent for the function that the coding is performing, right? So they get two different ways to copy to get protection. And then there's usually a brand name too, so they get a trademark too. So just to give you an example of how these kinds of things work. But that timestamp just shows a date and time when it was in creation. If someone shows up with something that's dated before that, or they can show that their song was released publicly before that. So oftentimes when, for instance, in song disputes, when people get involved in trying to figure out if one song infringed another song, or if someone stole or plagiarized from a prior song, is to look at the dates of creation and whether or not a song was published. So if you created a song and you never published it, and then you're sitting watching television and Drake comes on and you're like, hey, that's my song. I came up with that song first. I wrote that song 2 years ago. Well, if you never released it, Drake is not responsible for that because I could be in London and you could be in Tokyo and we might both write the same song. And copyright is exactly what it says, the right to copy. So if I didn't copy you in writing my song and you didn't copy me, neither one of us can claim that our songs are infringing the other. So that's a very important point. And there may be songs that sound very similar. There's a limited number of musical notes, and you can do the mathematical computation of how many different ways they can be put together, right? So it's important to consider these things. But overall, I think it's important to remember that if you want to file your copyright registration, a lot of artists or creators don't even realize that they're being quote unquote inspired. So remember the blurred lines litigation. I actually contributed to what's called an amicus brief, a friend of the court brief in favor of the Marvin Gaye estate in that case. And the interesting thing was that Pharrell and Robin Thicke actually had tried to get a sample clearance from the Gaye estate, and they couldn't agree on a percentage. I think the Gaye estate wanted maybe over 50% of the new song, and they didn't want to agree. And so they took an offensive posture, and they filed a lawsuit against the Marvin Gaye estate for a court to determine that Blurred Lines did not infringe Got to Give It Up. And guess what happened? They lost, because when the jury heard it and put it all together, and even got those other facts that they first tried to go get a sample clearance, they tried to say they were just inspired and that it was an homage, meaning a tribute to the style of Marvin Gaye, or it was in the same genre of music, right? So genre of music is going to matter, but it was way too similar, and the courts, including the appellate courts, ruled in favor of the Gaye estate in that particular case.
Absolutely. This chicken box is getting intellectual, y'all. We're learning about intellectual property. Our minds are going. If your mind wasn't awake before you got on the chicken box today, or if it's morning in the West Coast or nighttime over there in Europe or Africa, your mind is awake now. So, Lita, let me put it a different way. It is an artist from the inner city, doesn't have a lot of money, has a lot of talent, has big dreams of being a star one time in the music business, which is two words, which we could get into a whole show.
Yes. Business. Right.
But then there's the big record company that has all the money, all the marketing, all the channels, all the distribution to get your wonderful creation, your song, your likeness out to the world. Okay, now, after most people are famous, a lot of people listening will say, man, they took advantage of that. Was a bad deal. I wouldn't have never done that deal, and I wouldn't have. But you got to do the chicken and the egg, people, because without the label spending millions of dollars to make your brand relevant to the world, you're still in your little corner dreaming in your basement, creating, singing at all of the karaoke bars or whatever you're doing to try to get noticed. But then after the deal, I think back in the day, remember we met Babyface did a record for Drew Hill, a few records, but I think it was the one for Soul Food, We're Not Making Love. Right. Babyface said when you outlive all of your bad deals, that's when you will really have control. But without those original bad deals, because remember, if a label spends millions of dollars on you and you flop in your record and you're not a success, they don't come take your house. They don't put a bad mark on your credit report.
That's right.
You have to say, can I use this free tool to get my brand out there? And that's the decision you have to make, right?
Yeah, but I think it's important. So if you are that young person in that situation, or even an older person in that situation, it can happen to older people too, where a major label, even a small independent label, is coming to you and wants to do business. Get a lawyer. Don't go just signing contracts. Now, I've come across three different types of people when it comes to signing artists, really, when it comes to signing contracts. The first type will sign anything anybody puts in front of them. And they sign their rights away 3 and 4 times to different people and create a huge legal mess. Happens a lot in the Caribbean with reggae music and soca music and other types of music. Then there are the artists that are scared to death of contracts and won't sign anything. They're scared, even with the lawyer telling them it's okay. They just can't get over it. They see this 100-page or 60-page document and it's just overwhelming to them and they just get scared and don't want to sign. And then there's the third type who are reasonable, who look at the contract, say, okay, I want to do this. I don't understand what's going on. Let me go get a lawyer. Let me negotiate. So that's when, you're in a good situation. That's what you should do. So you go to the lawyer looks at the document. And what the lawyer really should do is explain the contract to the client, explain to them what some of the issues are, things that they want to negotiate and change. Then you go in and try to negotiate and change the things that you don't like. Maybe you'll get halfway to where you want to be. Maybe you'll get all of some things that you want. It's horse trading. You go back and forth until you figure out where you can live with the agreement. But after that, you make a note of the things that you really wanted to change. Like you really wanted to own your masters, right? You really wanted the right to step out and do independent projects without the label having anything to do with it. You really wanted them to start your clothing line and invest $250,000 into your clothing line. They wouldn't agree to those things. So you have those 3 things that you want. So it's all about timing. And when when it's the right time when you have success. That's the time when the irons are hot, when you strike to renegotiate your contract and get the things in your contract that you wanted in the beginning, but you couldn't get. You don't just take a big check and say, thank you. You had this success. Oh, they're just going to give you a big check, but you keep the same structure of the contract. You always keep inching forward to change that contract to be a contract that's more favorable to you. And that's a process, and it happens. Sugar Ray Leonard was often Sugar Ray Robinson, the original Sugar Ray Robinson was often in a situation where, let's say, they wanted him to box. He was a great boxer, African-American boxer. They would want him to box at, let's say, Madison Square Garden and offer him $50,000. So he wouldn't think $50,000 was enough, but he would take the $50,000 or take half up front, whatever it was. And then the night of the fight, he'd be in his hotel room across the street and say, I'm really, really, really not feeling well. And I'm not going to be feeling well until somebody shows up with a check for $100,000. That's the only way I'm going to be able to make it across the street to do this fight. And guess what? The promoters would find the $100,000. Now, that's an extreme example, but nevertheless, what it demonstrates is the power of the artist, of their physical being. We talk about our Black bodies, Ta-Nehisi Coates, and other people are constantly using this term about Black bodies. Well, guess what? Knowing when to take your Black body somewhere and when not to is an important part of negotiation, right? So the label wants you to go back in the studio. You just had a huge record. They want you back in the studio. They want your Black body. Time for a check. They want your Black body in a video. Time for a check. They want your Black body to do something else. Those are important times, points, inflection points where you have some leverage to ask for something more. And maybe it's even the time to ask for a change in your contract. The other important thing is to keep the term of your contract as short as possible and the number of records that you have to deliver as little as possible, because the closer you can get to ending that agreement, we get back to Babyface's statement, the closer you come to outliving those bad contracts and being able to negotiate better ones.
Boom. This is the Chicken Box. Actually, this is the Afro's Music Business School that that will get opened up. Welcome.
That's right.
Everybody, the revolutionists, Pam Curtis, Jewel, Diane, Shawan, Rochelle, Rachel, still hanging out, DJ Mr. Lee. We are having a great class, but it has been some history surrounding intellectual property. Dr. Draper, why don't you bring us to say, since we are the Afro-American newspaper, let's give a little history for a second.
Well, I think a lot of that history has already been shared. Lita just gave us history around Sugar Ray Robinson and a little bit about Babyface, And so, as we said before, African Americans, as we talk about music, we've been originators of so many genres of music, dance styles, fashions, and Misha referenced Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. And we saw there, what had typically happened to our artists before we even had access to a lot of, legal advice or knew where to go for it. Or One Night in Miami, and we've heard about musicians who were taken advantage of in a lot of places. I have a personal knowledge of it. My stepmother, Demita Joe, great jazz artist, great jazz artist. Even today, now she's been dead now for a while, so her music, you can go to Apple Music and you can download the great Demita Joe's music. Her estate, not she didn't get money while she was living, because she didn't have the right representation, and certainly not after she's gone. But people are still making money off of her music, and a lot of people heard. Janet Jackson released Demita
Right.
Joe, but
Right.
Janet was named for Demita Joe DeBlanc, was named for my stepmother. I mean, her
Uh,
mother and Demita were friends, so she was actually, so her mother didn't steal that name. I mean, the name is a name. But in terms of her music, I mean, I watched how hard she worked. I mean, I watched all of the, I traveled with them when they worked, all of these different clubs and venues and all of that, and the labels and, Capitol Music and other labels that they were on. But they just did not get the recognition in terms of finances. Yeah, yay, we like the artist. Yay, we like Demita Joe. Yeah, we love her music and we'll follow her. But it didn't translate into money because of what Lita's talking about. Just
yeah.
either no representation or poor representation.
Right. And often back then they would just have them sign almost like a one-page agreement saying that the label owned the recordings, and that was it. And unfortunately, the equivalent of the New York State Supreme Court ruled in a case involving one of the old 1950s female trio groups whose name I can't remember, but it'll come to me, like the Shirelles or someone like that. It might have even been the Shirelles. That if your recording contract doesn't have what's called a new media clause, and that's a clause that basically says whatever format this music is being sold in, you're entitled to collect a royalty, then you're not entitled to any royalties. So that means that if your contract said, you get 12% for sales of 33 and a third records and 45s, and it doesn't say anything about, CDs or downloads or anything like that, then you can't collect any money as an artist for that. The record company gets to retain all of that. We would be remiss today, though, if we did not talk about something called termination rights under the Copyright Act. So Congress has actually recognized these problems because while they disproportionately affect African Americans, people of color, they also affect all artists. And there are horror stories for all artists about, not being properly compensated for their work. And so they enacted an amendment to the Copyright Act that basically says, in short, that after 35 years of a transfer of you signing your rights away, your copyrights, this isn't patents, this isn't trademarks, this isn't publicity rights, but specifically your copyrights, which are the music, the songs themselves, and then the master recordings, that you can reclaim those rights and get them back. You can get the ownership back. Now, there are restrictions on that. It only applies to the U.S. rights because our laws only extend to the U.S. So you don't get your international rights back. You get your U.S. rights back, and you don't get back sampled work. So if someone sampled Demita Joe, let's say a rapper samples it, that sample stays with that original record company. But the record company still has the duty to account for the money that they're owing under your old agreement. But you would get the rights for the original song back. And then if someone in the future wanted to sample it, you could control that and collect all the money yourself. So right now for songwriters, the law is very clear. if a songwriter transfers a right. It's not as clear for artists and master recordings because recording contracts typically say that master recordings are what we call works made for hire, which is another important term for us to talk about in the context of intellectual property, which basically says that you made this work as a commissioned work for the record company and they own it. And then in that case, you're not entitled to terminate and get your rights back. Now, there are some very specific particularities that relate to that. And there's actually a Supreme Court case that basically says that unless an artist was actually an employee, just because the contract says it's a work for hire doesn't mean that it is unless they were actually an employee, meaning that the indicia, what we call indicia of employment were there. So you have an employer, they're paying you, they're taking taxes out of your check every week or every 2 weeks. They're giving you a certain workplace to work. They're controlling your daily activities while you're at work. And we all know that's not the case for recording artists. As a result, there are 2 class action lawsuits currently pending in New York, in federal court in New York, against Sony Music Entertainment and Universal to say that artists should be allowed to terminate their recording contracts and get their masters back because they are not, in fact, employees of record labels, and therefore their works cannot be works for hire.
Wow, that's fascinating. And I don't know that we have time to get into it, but that applies to the industry that we're in. When you talk about media and all the things that we put on social media, I think about the Young Poet Laureate yesterday.
Yes, yes.
And it's everywhere.
Yes, I thought about that too, and I was actually going to mention her. What was her name? Amanda, right. Right, and Gorman, right. So I thought about the very same thing because that poem could make millions and millions of dollars, but I know it's already streaming everywhere. And what her lawyers would have to, first of all, she's got to have it copywritten, right? So she's got to get that copywritten. I don't know if she had it copywritten before she read it up there. Hopefully she did. But if she didn't, she can run and go do it now. It's not too late. It's never too late to copyright your work. It doesn't matter if you wrote it, 50 years before. You can copyright it at any point in time. And copywriting it with the U.S. Copyright Office is a prerequisite to basically getting cease and desist letters out to tell people to take it down. So she could send cease and desist notices to Facebook and others to say, take it down, because she's losing a lot of money. A lot of people would buy that poem or her reciting that poem. So it's a little unfortunate.
Rochelle,
we'll see what happens.
Rochelle, thank you for your question. She said, what is the best way, and there's a lot of social media content out there, for social media content creators to protect their work? Should they copyright their videos as they go in batches?
Well, okay, so in the Copyright Office, if you have published your work, you have to file a separate copyright registration for it and pay a separate fee, which I think now is somewhere between $45 and $65 per work. So if you're making, let's say you're doing a web series and you do, you already have them done, you have 5 of them and you haven't actually put them up to stream yet, you can file one copyright registration for all of those in a bunch together. And then you can air them or stream them as you feel. But if you start streaming it right away, then you're going to have to file a separate copyright registration for each one. But you certainly should do that. Now, there's a lot of confusion with a lot of social media sites because the perception is that if you put a video up on social media that basically legally it's gone. It might not be legally gone. Practically it might be gone because you might not be able to pull it back. But legally that's not the case. Legally you are still the owner. You can file a copyright registration and you can go and send cease and desist notices if someone's using it without authorization in order to take it down. If you're otherwise, some people just put up content on the internet for the heck of it. Like you see all these YouTube videos where how-to videos or people testing products or looking at Louis Vuitton bags. You see all these, or how to put a certain hair product in your hair. All of those kinds of things. Those creators certainly can file copyright registrations for their work. And technically, other people can't, and if they're sharing it with the link to YouTube, let's say it's airing on YouTube and they're sharing it with the link to YouTube, that's okay. What they can't do is copy it and post it somewhere else.
Got it. Got it. Man, the conversation's getting good. This is a Chicken Box, Black People versus Intellectual Property. I hope that you learned something. The four things. There was the copyright, the trademark, the patent, and what was the fourth one?
Trade secrets.
Trade secrets. And the big thing behind that is to keep it a secret. If you
That's
have
right.
grandma's secret recipe with the best apple pie or sweet potato pie, please put
Right.
it up and don't tell anybody except
Exactly. Patty LaBelle's keeping her recipe a secret.
Absolutely. Patty's pie. Anyway, every week we do an Afro fact. Since we've been around for 129 years, there's always an Afro fact that's in the vault. Misha Green, what is the fact of the week?
Well, this week's Afro fact is inspired not by today's conversation, but definitely about what we've been talking about on the Chicken Box, as well as in the Afro in general. And that is police brutality. The headline on January 20th, 1962 was "The Police and Civil Rights." In the article, our writer George Collins first lists facts showing that none of the more than 3,000 officers on Baltimore's police force had been punished for police brutality. And from April 19th, 1956 to August 4th, 1957, 9 Black people had been killed by police, while solely 1 white person had been killed in that same time. I love Collins' article and how he leads it. He states, "If you are poor and become involved with the law, you have 1 strike against you before the slow wheels of justice makes the first move. If you are colored and accused or even suspected of committing a crime, the same is true, perhaps even more. But if you're poor and colored, you've had it." The article goes on to talk about police brutality as a civil rights issue, which we're still having today. And that now has sparked the Black Lives Matter movement. And so it's just amazing to think that almost 59 years ago yesterday, this conversation. And that's this week's Afro fact.
Wow. If you've never heard of the Afro and somebody shared this, we have been around for 129 years and you cannot control our voice. We're not owned by anybody else. We are going to represent the African American view. We're gonna speak life to truth. We are going to continue to tell our story like no others would. The reason we even started a news organization back then, because let them tell it. We didn't get married. We didn't have any attorneys. We weren't running any businesses. Speaking of that, we have a Black Business Matters conference coming up. It is free, you guys. If you would like to learn more about business, how you can take your life into your own hands and stop making somebody else's dream come true. Black Business Matters. Just save the date, February 18th. It will be virtual this year. We have some action-packed guests. We have, Dr. Draper, we have Robert Smith confirmed.
Yep, Robert Smith is absolutely confirmed.
And if you don't know who he is, guys, please Google that. He is probably one of the richest African American billionaires in the world. One of them. It's a couple of them in Nigeria.
Yeah,
that pop up from time to time. We also have Eric. I'm not even reading the flyer. Let me get the flyer. Help me out real quick.
I just wrote the article, so I can do it. So yeah, it's Robert Smith, Eddie Brown, who is also a big time investor, philanthropist, entrepreneur. There's realtor and radio personality Egypt Sherrod, the hip hop preacher Dr. Eric Thomas, a marketing guru and educator David Shands, Kalia Wright of Mess in the Bottle, and Brian J. Olds of the Black Speaker Network.
Thank you very much. I'm going to get it. That's why we're a team.
Kevin, it's February 18th. It's virtual. Go to Eventbrite, but make sure you look at Black Business Matters Expo. There it is on the screen. It's free. it's all day, but we know people may or may not hang out all day. But if you've not heard Robert Smith, he is the gentleman who paid the tuition for those Morehouse students.
Oh.
So we're waiting to sit at his feet. He's our keynote speaker for the Black Business Matters Expo. And so we are excited about the fact that he's going to join us. Look, we could continue this discussion, Leader Rosario Richardson, to talk about, even like I said, copyright for the paper. That's another whole thing when people are doing media. But I see a question from Rachel Humphrey.
Yeah.
She said, what about a creative T-shirt? She wants to know, did you say?
Well, if you create some unique design that you want to print on T-shirts, you would copyright that design as a piece of art, graphic art, or maybe even fine art. I don't know. But that would be the protection that you would actually seek for it. Can I get on the chicken box for a minute about the whole question of
please.
police brutality? Because I think after the insurrection on January 6th, it's very notable that the insurrectionists are not being charged adequately by the police or the prosecutors who are looking into this. There's something called felony murder that many of you may be aware of, because felony murder laws and conspiracy laws are used disproportionately against Black kids that are standing out on street corners. And basically, felony murder says that if someone dies while you're in the commission of a felony, then you can be charged with murder. So there's a bunch of young African-American and older African-Americans who are in jail on felony murder charges when they went to rob a convenience store and the owner had a heart attack because they were scared. They didn't pull out a gun. They didn't do anything else. Or a policeman gets shot in pursuing a felon, a robbery or something like that. And everyone involved gets charged with felony murder and goes to jail for murder. Now, in this case, that one police officer was killed. There's a clear basis for charging all of these people that get caught with felony murder. And we don't see felony murder charges yet. And I'm really waiting to see. And the other problem that we have with the criminal justice system is overcharging. Black people are always overcharged. I had some cousins who got into a dispute, young 20-year-olders in Massachusetts with a white kid, and they ended up having a barroom brawl. And they ended up charging my cousins with like 15 different counts over a fight that nobody even really got hurt in. And the judges and the prosecutors refused to have lesser charges on them for something that was minor. No one was even hospitalized over it. And yet we have these people who engage in this insurrection from the Boogie Boys and all these other organizations that they should be charging with conspiracy, felony murder, and everything else. And they're not. And it's very distressing to me. And I'm really hoping that the Biden administration and VP Harris are going to take some action there to do something in terms of making sure that people are properly charged.
Absolutely. If you weren't fired up before, you will absolutely have fired everybody up. And let us not forget, let's push to that. Let's make that, just the fairness of what happened, because we all know, and we could get on the box. All right, I'm getting on the box now. We can get on the box and say what it would have been if it was us. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
and we already know. I mean, if
they would have shot, it wouldn't have mattered how many protesters there were. The police would just
no. The helicopters would have came out.
Everything shooting.
They would have dropped some bombs, some.
Yeah, exactly, like they did in Philly that time with that organization in Philly. The move, right? Exactly.
Absolutely. So we know it's not an equal playing field here. We already know that. If you try to think that it is, it's not. We're moving in a spirit of unity yesterday, and for those who can comprehend the spirit of unity, hopefully you will be able to govern yourselves accordingly. Hopefully, you can really only control how you act and think. So if those people who went down there and she said, I got maced, I just stepped one foot in there. You went to the Capitol knowing that it was illegal, but and
they were spraying mace. They came with hammers, sledgehammers, and all kinds of stuff, beating cops with pipes and flagpoles, and they're not charging them with conspiracy. We don't need a new domestic terrorism law. You know why, gang? Because they're going to use that against Black people. That will end up getting used against us. My husband tried to post on his Facebook page a Malcolm X speech, and Facebook took that down and said it was hate speech, right? So we have to be careful because we don't really need a new domestic terrorism law. There's plenty of laws on the books to prosecute those people for what they did and to allow the FBI to look into what's going on with these hate groups and to tap their telephones and do the other things they do. Just like that bomber in Nashville. How ridiculous is it that his girlfriend a year before called and told the police that he was building bombs, but because he's a white man, the police go there and say, oh, everything looks okay. And then what does he do? And I was willing to bet, I would think it's likely that he probably was one of these white supremacist sympathizers or in one of those groups. These lone wolves, Dylan, whatever his name is, that went into the church in South Carolina, they're all being inspired by this stuff. This is terrorism. If they're going to say Islamic terrorism is terrorism, then this is terrorism. But there are laws on the books that will, conspiracy laws, felony murder laws, that will help with these situations. If they put a new domestic terrorism law on the books, I can guarantee you that people of color will be the ones that are in jail using those laws.
No doubt about it.
Misha Green, I'm gonna put you in some hot grease on the chicken box. And Alita's on the roll. She could probably get it, have all of us. But what you feeling, Misha?
As in, what do I want to comment on? Right?
What do you have to get on the box about anything? Intellectual property.
The journalist in me really wants to ask Lita like 40 more questions.
Okay, well, you can have her, Lita. We're going to schedule a one-on-one with Misha Green and Lita Rosario, and y'all can go at it. Okay?
I would love that. But, I'm really happy that we were able to sort of shift gears back into policy and into looking, going back and looking at the insurrection, which we talked about, of course, on Chicken Box before, and how we would have been affected as Black people, but also these sort of, policies that they're trying to put in place that really could negatively affect us, as they already are and are not affecting white people. But more importantly, since we got on this subject, I really want to know if the 45th president should also be in prison right now, because that's where I am. So since we're talking about it, I'm trying to figure out how there are no charges brought against him at this point.
Well, they're talking about possibly bringing charges against him. I think, in all honesty, while we all can say that, if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. If it looks like a crook, it's a crook. We can see his mafioso loyalty standards and all this craziness that he put our country through. Really, I think he needs to be impeached for killing 400,000 people in the coronavirus. Forget the insurrection. But, we'll have to wait and see what happens. The realities, unfortunately, are that, and this is a political consideration, is, imprisoning a former president has a lot of international political implications for the United States. And that might be a reason why they choose not to do it. Clearly he was a co-conspirator with Michael Cohen. He's got financial fraud issues with his tax returns and insurance claims. He's got other issues regarding what happened in Georgia, calling up and trying to, force them. And I'm sure he did the same thing with other states too. We just haven't heard about it yet, calling secretaries of state or governors and telling them to fix votes for him. So we have all of these potential acts that are potential criminal. I think we just have to wait and see what happens. Letitia James, she's a bad girl, okay, from up in New York. She single-handedly took on the NRA, and she is clearly another HU grad. We have so many HBCU graduates who have done significant things in this election cycle, not just Kamala Harris. We've got Morehouse man, Raphael Warnock. We've got Cedric Richmond, a Morehouse man. We've got Stacey Abrams, who's Spelman. I mean, we've just got the black colleges and universities just really stood up this time and did what they were supposed to do. So, what could happen? I agree. Someone just said Obama did leave a blueprint for COVID, and Trump certainly did ignore it. Absolutely. And I think just as in Flint, Michigan, with the water crisis, there should be criminal liability for that. Whether or not that actually happens or not, it's a political consideration of, how do we look to other countries imprisoning our former president. I don't know how all that's going to pan out. But one thing's for sure. The Senate should definitely vote to impeach him. And after that, they should take a vote, which only takes a simple majority so the Democrats could pull it off, to prevent him from ever running for political office again, stripping him of his pension, his Secret Service. And they certainly should not be giving him the secret briefs, the intelligence briefs every day now. That just seems crazy. So, oh, happy day. That's all I can say is that he's out. I couldn't wait to the moment when he was no longer in charge.
Absolutely. I think that sentiment is strong. Dr. Draper, the grease is so hot. We're going to go a little bit over. Those who can hang out. Those who can't, you can come back and watch the end of the recording with Dr. Draper.
Well said. I think he's going to enter an insanity plea because he certainly can get off on that. If he doesn't get off,
and he'll try it. Yes,
insanity plea. But in terms of just Kevin says the grease is hot. So when we talk about all of this, whether it's copyright patents, incarceration, mistreatment of blacks, come on, the root cause, it may manifest itself different ways, but the fact that we can still talk about the same things today in 2021 that we were talking about in 1961 still goes to the root cause of the structures and systems that are in place. And until those are dismantled, we will continue to be on the short end of the stick. However, the dismantling is coming because of things like yesterday, the inauguration of the vice president, because their leader, Rosario Richardson's, that are being not just trained leaders, been out there probably on the battlefield for a long time, but there are more of us, and there are more people who are really aware of the things that are behind what we're talking about, even with the police brutality. That's a structure. Those are things that have been allowed to happen for centuries. That's that we right. Construct. The laws are there in a lot of cases, so it's not a matter of let's go and spend some time and study. It's like when people have a problem,
right?
Let's study it some more. Well, we have studied it and studied it and studied it, and we know what the problem is, and we also know how to get to the solutions. And so I too am HBCU proud, and so people who say, oh wow, I didn't know that there was a smart attorney like leader Rosario Richardson. Come on, there are a whole lot of us out there. So when
that's right.
And raise our voices, and we have voice inside of the highest offices of the land and in some of these cabinet positions and controlling the Senate. But I'm not so foolish to think that everybody who doesn't look like us is on our side, or that everybody who looks like us is on our side.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
And so we have a responsibility, especially at the Afro and the Black press. And for those who may or may not know, check out Word in Black, inblack.com. 10 of the leading Black newspapers across the country. We've band together. We'll add others as we go along. We need to raise our voice. We need to amplify our voice. And so this is not just a shameless plug for the Afro, even though I'm not ashamed to ask for support, but we are independent media to get our stories out. And so when we talk about what needs to happen, we need to support our own. Mm-hmm. You need a subscription to the Afro or wherever you're located. Okay, yeah. Can you get your news real quick? Every place else, yeah, all of us can do that. But we need independent businesses, Black media business that are not controlled by folk who tell you what you can and can't write,
Right.
or what you can and can't say. And there are less than 200 black newspapers, or about 200 black newspapers in the country. Their voices get silenced in some of these key places. Then we really won't have independent outlets. So I'm gonna get off the box about that, but I really am passionate about. And don't get fooled when people say, "Well, I can listen to I can watch I can do social media." If Facebook decides tomorrow that they shutting down or shutting you down, that you're done.
That's right.
If Twitter decides tomorrow to kick you off, you're done. We don't own those things. We need to support what we own, and then we need to take the resources we have and buy some of these channels so that we won't get shut down. I'm off the box.
Absolutely. This has been an amazing day after the amazing change that happened yesterday.
Yes.
We're smiling, and yet we're still ready to fight. And that's how you should be. You got to be aware. You got to be really fact check. That's the word of 2021. Don't just hear something and then begin to just spread it all over. I go back to, the Afro-American newspaper, 129 years. And that's a family business. In case you don't know, that beautiful Dr. Frances Draper is my mother. It's a family business. My grandmother used to run the Washington, D.C. office where Misha is. Now, Lita's mother had a memorabilia business, which her mother wanted to support the Afro-American newspaper. So she ran an ad about her business in the Washington Afro almost 30 years ago.
That's
right. Where Lita and I met.
That's how we met.
Not music. And then, we continued our relationship. And it wasn't cell phone. I don't even think it was beepers back then. But one day I called her up and said, I got a group, because she told me she was going to do some music business attorney, and she was starting a record label at Howard University Music and a whole bunch of things. And our connection from the Afro led to Drew Hill. So we've been friends for 30 years, and I'm thank you for getting on the chicken box. Thank you for always supporting the Afro. I had to go back in my mind to think where, in fact, where we first met.
In fact, I saved some of those editions of the Afro with that ad in it, and I got to find them. They're around here somewhere, but I saved them.
Okay, yeah, let's get them in the frame, because that was a Memorial Day. Lita has a lot of, what's the name of all of the African American attorneys?
The BSLA, Black Entertainment and Sports Lawyers Association.
Right.
And the National Bar Association is the Black Lawyers Association, generally.
Absolutely, guys. If you don't know the law and you don't know what's going on, please employ our African American attorneys to help you out before it is too late and you're over a barrel and you really and you really need help. So again, thank you, Lita. You are now an official Afro and Chicken Box correspondent. So we will pull you in, because
I'll be your legal expert. How about that? When you need a legal expert.
There it is. And if you need an attorney, I don't know how many clients she's taken this year, but
I don't know.
Look her up. Look her up. So,
all right.
Again, we have the Black business. I'm going to try to do better, you guys. I'm going to share my screen for half a second, just for somebody else who may want to register. Man, this is. I don't know why they don't want me to want us to know about this Black business matters, because it does matter. All right, here we go.
Here it comes.
I have a flyer, everybody. February 18th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. It will be on demand if you are doing something during that time. We have Robert Smith. We have Eric. Oh man, the hip hop. I just call him the hip hop preacher all the time. Eric Thomas. We have Egypt. If you're in the Baltimore or Washington area, she was on the radio for years. Now she's on television. And we have Dr. Draper. We're gonna have some comments from the mayor. We got Robert Smith, the Black billionaire, and who knows who else will pop up between now and February 18th. It is free. We have 2 tracks. We have an accelerated track and an emerging track. If you're just starting out, the emerging track will be where you are. If you are now trying to take your business to the next level, it will be the accelerated track. So we will see you guys on February 15th. I'm Kevin.
February 18th.
18th, February 18th. Fact check. That's right. February 18th. Thanks everybody who hung out. We learned about intellectual property today. We will see you next week, prayerfully, on the Chicken Box. And
just please tune in 20 minutes to Afro Live. We have Keith Manley from Married at First Sight. So that's a good conversation.
Misha got internet drunk on us a little bit, but I think she said Keith Manley from Married. What did you say? Oh,
from Married at First Sight.
Married at First Sight. All right, so come back because that's going to be a great interview. All right, thank you everybody, until we meet again. Have a great